Welcome back to Crime Documentary Files. Today we're diving into a case from a fascinating country, Argentina. A young, beautiful woman appeared to live an ordinary life with a bright future ahead of her. But after meeting a man 30 years her senior with a mysterious past, her life took a dark turn. What seemed like a romantic relationship quickly spiraled into a nightmare. The central figure in this case is Rosana Edith Galeano, born in late 1978 in Buenos Aires province, Argentina. She was the youngest of 4 children born to Ronaldo Galeano and Graciela Noemi Rodriguez. Her siblings were named Monica, Oscar, and Gustavo. Though the family has been careful to keep details about Rosana's childhood and teenage years private, we do know that by the late 1990s, she had graduated from high school. At that time, her father Ronaldo was working as a mechanic at a repair shop. This shop would become the setting for Rosana's fateful meeting with her future husband. In early 2001, a customer named Jose Jacinto Arce arrived at the shop. Jose was born on November 22, 1948, in Famaya, a city in the Tucumán province of Argentina. He was the son of Pedro Jacinto Arce and Elsa Timotea Aguilar. Jose had spent over 30 years living in Greece and the United States. During his time in the U.S., he served a 4-year prison sentence for drug trafficking. Although his mother remained in the U.S., Jose was forced to return to Argentina in 1996. By that time, he owned 8 properties in the upscale Barrio Norte district of the capital and was rumored to hold an engineering degree. In his homeland, Jose was considered somewhat of a millionaire. When Jose brought his vintage car to Reynaldo's shop for repairs, he and Rosana met. Despite their 30-year age difference, they quickly began dating. At the time, Rosana was unemployed and fairly reserved. Jose, on the other hand, appeared to be a wealthy man. However, his main source of income didn't come from the poultry and egg distribution company he ran, but rather from the money his mother, Elsa, regularly sent from the U.S. Not long after, when Jose came to ask for Rosana's hand in marriage, he was 52 years old, and she was only 22. Graciela, Rosana's mother, asked Jose if he thought he might be too old for her daughter, but Jose confidently replied that love knows no age. To be sure before agreeing, her mother looked Rosana straight in the face. In a soft and hesitant voice, Rosana said that she wanted to marry him. With that answer, Rosana's parents respected their daughter's choice, but they advised her to think it through carefully. On the night of November 17, 2001, Jose and Rosana were married in a church after just 7 months of dating. According to Jose, he won her over with his cheerful, modern, and intelligent personality. They married, and initially had happy times together, and their first child, a son, was born shortly afterward. They named him Geronimo. From that point on, however, those close to Rosana noticed the problems starting to surface. Jose was not only a controlling and jealous man who always wanted to know what Rosana was doing, but he also frequently showed disdain for her and her family. It was only a matter of time before these issues became physically evident, and indeed they did. Rosana had no voice in the relationship, her freedom was taken away, and fear became her daily reality. Clearly, Jose fostered this fear because it ensured that he could maintain control and keep her obedient. In fact, Jose owned 2 guns, or at least that's what Rosana's family could confirm. He often flaunted them when guests came over, or when he visited others. On one occasion, while Rosana's brother Oscar was helping paint her house, he witnessed Jose's physical violence toward his sister. Jose told Rosana to be quiet, and then hit her. Another time her father noticed a scratch on her back, and Rosana admitted that her husband had dragged her across the asphalt. Despite everything, the couple welcomed their second child, Nehuen. At this point, Rosana put all her energy into improving their relationship. Her goal was to provide a stable and secure home for her children. However, her sacrifices were constantly met with Jose's temper and disdain. To make matters worse, Jose's mother, Elsa, was the one who really held the power in the family, despite living far away. She frequently visited them, though her stays in Argentina lasted no more than a month or a month and a half. During these visits, Elsa would dictate what Jose and Rosanna should do, and Jose would comply without much objection, despite some occasional complaints. By 2006, Rosanna had reached her breaking point. In April of that year, she finally gathered the courage to report Jose for domestic violence. At that time, she only felt safe when she was with her children, Geronimo and Newen. Her family was unaware of the details of her situation, as Rosanna was very careful about what she revealed. A few months later, Rosanna filed a second report, which included a request for a forensic examination of her injuries, followed by several more similar complaints. By this time, Rosanna could no longer keep what she was enduring a secret, and decided to confide fully in her sister Monica. They agreed that Rosanna would call Monica whenever something happened. Gradually, but increasingly often, Rosanna leaned on her sister for support, and Monica became her refuge. When things became unbearable, Rosanna would visit Monica's apartment in Ituzaingó with Geronimo and Newen. During these visits, Jose would dictate the time she needed to return home, always accompanied by threats of violence if she disobeyed. On other occasions he would simply yell at her, accusing her of being useless and claiming that she was a terrible mother. Finally, Rosanna decided to move in with Monica along with her children. Meanwhile, Jose remained at one of his properties, the fifth house he owned, called La Dulzura, located in the town of Derqui in Pilar County. There, he employed two workers, Paulo, aged 35, and Gabriel Leguizamon, aged 41. It seemed like things would calm down, but just a few months after their separation, Rosanna filed another complaint against her husband and requested a divorce. From that point on, Jose was legally barred from approaching her. He was only allowed to be near Rosanna when exercising court-ordered visitation rights, which took place at a house he owned in the El Romanzo residential area of Exaltación de la Cruz, a district in northeastern Buenos Aires province. It was at this location that Rosanna began to confide in the gardener, Daniel Gonzalez, about her nightmare. Daniel lived 4 blocks away, was married, and had a daughter. Some reports suggested that a secret romance had developed between Daniel and Rosanna, but this rumor was never confirmed. Meanwhile, Jose's threats continued to escalate. She even played a voicemail for her brother Oscar, in which Jose could be heard yelling about how he was going to end her life. Tensions remained high until mid-2007. While dining with friends at a pizza place, Rosanna met Oscar Lugo, referred to here by his full name to differentiate him from Rosanna's brother, who shares the same first name. Lugo was 32 years old, lived in Moreno, and worked in a sewing factory. It was love at first sight. They exchanged phone numbers and began dating. Lugo was an old-fashioned gentleman, polite, kind, attentive, and a good listener, qualities that stood in stark contrast to the violent, rude behavior of Rosanna's much older husband. At the age of 29, after what felt like an endless series of storms, Rosanna suddenly seemed to reclaim a sense of happiness she thought she had lost forever. For his part, Oscar Lugo noticed Rosanna's lack of confidence, likely a result of the long period of fear she endured with her husband. In December 2007, Oscar celebrated the holidays with her, even dressing up as Santa Claus and one of the 3 wise men to entertain Geronimo and Newen. But not everything was perfect for the couple, as Jose continued to keep tabs on Rosanna's every move. When Jose learned about Rosanna's new relationship and grew desperate over the impending divorce, he called her and offered to give her a car in exchange for breaking up with Oscar Lugo. Rosanna of course refused, and it was Oscar Lugo who took her to the hospital to see a psychologist after she suffered a severe nervous breakdown. When Jose ran out of options, he devised a plan, with his cruel mother Elsa once again playing the role of financier. After meticulously calculating every step, they hired a hitman, whose identity remains an unsolved mystery to this day. On January 16, 2008, Rosanna and Monica went to El Romanzo to pick up the children. They had planned to get them in the afternoon, but Jose kept coming up with excuses to delay. At 9:15 p.m., Rosanna's cell phone rang for the first time in a while. It was Jose, claiming that Geronimo had a fever. He said he would take the boy to the hospital and return him the next day. However, Rosanna was determined to pick up her children and care for Geronimo herself. The conversation lasted just 1 minute. Afterward, she went inside. Around 9:53 p.m., she sent a message to Oscar Lugo, simply a greeting and a reminder about the plans they had made for the next day. At around 10 p.m., Rosanna and Monica were having dinner in the living room. At 10:50 p.m., Rosanna's phone rang again. It was Jose on the other end, and their conversation would turn into a deadly trap. Rosanna answered the call, but due to poor reception, she stepped outside into the garden to talk. At that moment, a shadow emerged from behind the thick trees and fired 4 shots at her. Monica screamed as she heard the gunfire. She saw her sister stumble and collapse. In a panic, Monica rushed to find a cell phone to call 911 but couldn't connect. She then called her boyfriend and asked him to notify the police. Meanwhile, Oscar Lugo, completely unaware of what had just happened, tried to call Rosanna again at 11 p.m. As the police investigation, led by Officer Rodolfo Fernandez, got underway, they discovered that the gunman had entered through a vacant lot adjacent to the house. A witness claimed to have seen the shooter escape through one of the gaps in the fence surrounding the neighborhood. He was wearing a t-shirt and shorts, but due to the darkness, nothing else could be made out. 3 meters from Rosanna's body, officers found spent shell casings. That same night, Jose was interrogated, and he acted surprised. He later requested the services of a lawyer, delegating his representation to the attorney, and leaving the scene. The following day, during another search, a red sweater soaked in dew was found. According to Rosanna's family, the item belonged to Jose. In their view, there was no longer any doubt. Jose was the prime suspect. The case attracted media attention and shocked the entire country. It became infamous when Jose and Elsa publicly smeared Rosanna, appearing on various TV channels to proclaim their innocence while disparaging the victim. Jose himself spread the claim that it was Rosanna's lovers who should be the primary suspects. Since the incident, Daniel, the gardener, had barely left his house or spoken to anyone. On the night of Rosanna's final visitation, Reynaldo saw Jose nearby, observing everything from a truck. However, Jose did not get out or approach to offer condolences or share in the family's grief. Later, Jose's defense attorney targeted Monica, Rosanna's sister, and the sole eyewitness, casting doubt on her testimony. They argued it was suspicious that her clothes had no blood on them. They also highlighted that instead of helping her sister, Monica ran to find a phone. However, the theory that Monica had fired the gun was baseless. Investigators pointed out that the firearm was heavy and had a strong recoil, ruling out the possibility that the shooter was a woman. Another detail emphasized by prosecutor Marcelo Pernici and detectives from the Zarate and Campana police departments was that anyone familiar with the house knew Rosanna had to go outside to get cell phone reception. This factor indicated that the crime had been meticulously planned. While the investigation was ongoing, Geronimo and Newen were placed in the care of their father and grandmother, Elsa. Although their grandmother Graciela was allowed visitation rights, Monica and Oscar were denied access. Jose claimed there were serious safety concerns regarding his children, and the judges issued a restraining order barring them from contact. However, because the children were used to seeing their aunt, they expressed a desire to visit her. So Jose eventually relented and allowed them to occasionally see Monica. Thanks to her persistent efforts with the National Family Bureau, Monica used those brief moments to take the kids to see a psychologist. After some time, Graciela was granted visitation rights, but was not awarded custody. In an interview during that period, Jose claimed that Rosanna had 4 lovers, all of whom had legal issues. According to him, she became intimately involved with these men to learn their secrets, and later threatened to expose them for her own benefit. Meanwhile, after receiving several threats, Oscar was declared a protected witness in his sister's case. As a result, he had to wear a tracking bracelet and was assigned police protection. The following months passed, and by the end of 2007, the court announced there was still no definitive evidence to identify any specific suspect among the many in the case. The turning point Rosanna's family had been waiting for came a year after the events. In January 2008, Jose was arrested and charged with murder, with 3 aggravating factors: the relationship to the victim, premeditation, and the involvement of 2 or more people. Brothers Pablo and Gabriel were identified by witnesses as the direct perpetrators of the killing. By Monday, January 28, 2008, interrogation hearings had begun. Jose complained that it had been a full year and 2 months since his wife's death before the prosecutor called him in for the first time. He was shocked that he had been switched from being considered a victim to a suspect in just 24 hours. Before the prosecution, Daniel the gardener testified. The police had searched his home and confiscated his cell phone. Ronaldo, Graciela, Monica and Oscar also detailed everything they knew about Jose's repeated threats, his violent behavior, and how he brandished weapons to intimidate others. Rosana's mother even showed the prosecutor the last messages her daughter had sent her. Upon leaving the room, Reynaldo, the victim's father, stated, "Over the past year I felt like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, but a sense of relief has finally settled over me, knowing that I've done the right thing to honor my daughter's memory." In the next hearing, Oscar Lugo was required to testify before Prosecutor Marcelo. Without hesitation, he pointed out Jose's malicious actions, which were consistent with what Rosana's family had previously described. He added, "Jose is trying to tarnish both my reputation and Rosana's." He then revealed a crucial piece of information. Before her murder, Rosana was convinced that the story about her having multiple lovers was part of Jose's strategy to leave her penniless during the divorce proceedings. In this context, Ramiro Rua, Jose's attorney, denied the accusations regarding his client's emotional instability and aggressive behavior, claiming that the story being presented was merely a one-sided account from Rosana. By February 7, 2008, there was a 12-hour interrogation session. The final testimony before Prosecutor Marcelo was from Elsa, who had flown in from the United States. Alongside this, a new search was conducted at El Remanso, but no new evidence was uncovered. At this point, Rosana's family began to suspect Elsa's involvement in the plot. For this reason, Roberto Bavington, the lawyer representing Reynaldo and Graciela, announced that they were considering requesting Elsa's arrest. In response, Claudia Zakim, Jose's lawyer and Elsa's legal advisor, stated that in her testimony, Elsa had made it clear that she had purchased the house for her grandchildren and understood that the division of assets following the divorce would not affect that property. Her stance was supported by her co-counsel, Ramiro, who argued that it was entirely incorrect to suggest that Elsa and Rosana had a poor relationship. As the case continued, Rosana's murder and the conspiracy to eliminate her remained a topic of debate across Argentine news channels. The theory that Jose was the mastermind behind the crime, with another perpetrator acting on his behalf, gained more traction. However, Jose was released on bail and continued to care for his children. Sometime later, the court ruled that the witness protection assigned to Oscar Lugo, after he received threats, was no longer necessary. He worked as a taxi driver in the Ituzaingó area. In the early hours of Saturday, July 5, 2008, he was ambushed by 2 armed men. For an hour they beat him and threatened to kill him. When the taxi dispatch center lost contact with Oscar Lugo, they called for the intervention of police station number 4 in Moreno. By tracking the signal emitted from the bracelet Oscar Lugo wore as part of the witness protection program, authorities found him abandoned in a vacant lot in the area. While he didn't suffer any serious injuries, he was deeply shaken by the experience. Oscar's car was later found at the intersection of 25th Street and Arroyo Road. Commissioner Walter Astegiano of the Buenos Aires police station issued a statement to the press regarding the incident. In addition to the pain of Rosana's death and the ongoing struggle to secure custody of the children, Rosana's family now faced a new wave of fear. This fear was not unfounded, but real and justified. With no perpetrators in custody and constant threats, the need for justice became more urgent than ever. However, the legal system seemed to move at a frustratingly slow pace. Years passed, and both the trial and the custody battle for Geronimo and Nehuen were delayed. By 2012, 4 years after the attack on him, Oscar used his visitation rights to take the children to play soccer at a park in Castellar. He asked for a hug from them, knowing it would be one he would never forget. At that time, the children were 6 and 7 years old. Finally, in April 2013, the trial took place at the Criminal Court No. 1 in Campana. Along with Jose, his mother Elsa, and the brothers Paulo and Gabriel, all sat in the dock. However, despite several witnesses being called, none could identify the brothers Paulo and Gabriel as the culprits. There was no evidence placing them at the scene where Rosanna was shot, either during or in the hours surrounding the attack. As a result, due to a lack of evidence, the court intervened and decided to acquit them. For her part, Elsa maintained her innocence. She stated that she never learned to hate or speak harshly, only to remain silent and respectful. "Everyone knows why they choose to say or not say certain things," she said. Later, during a hearing in May, Jose suffered a hemorrhagic stroke, which further delayed the proceedings. It wasn't until November 2013 that the parties finally reconvened to hear the verdict. According to the judges, the way the attack on Rosanna was planned and carried out showed clear signs of organized crime. Jose and Elsa had carefully selected the location and the day, knowing that if they called Rosanna's cell phone, she would step outside, making her vulnerable to a surprise attack. In the end, the court concluded that financial motives were also part of the reason for Rosanna's murder, as Jose did not want to share their joint assets. Jose and Elsa were both sentenced to life in prison. When the Court of Appeals upheld their sentences, it emphasized Jose's repeated threats, the gender-based violence his wife endured, and the controlling influence Elsa had over her son. The verdict noted they had strong motives to kill the victim. The true perpetrator of the murder was never identified. However, in 2015, both Jose and Elsa were granted house arrest, Jose due to his stroke and Elsa because of her age. Since then, Geronimo and Nehuen had returned to live with Jose's family. Because of the strange circumstances surrounding the children's fate, the media continued covering the story for years. During that time, both Monica and Graciela were denied visitation with the children, who lived with their father's acquaintances and strangers. For Rosanna's family, the fight to reunite with the children became Oscar's driving force in life. By the age of 40, he had endured 9 years of watching his nephews live with Jose, the man who orchestrated their mother's murder. He persevered, determined to see progress in the case, knowing the value of patience better than anyone. In addition to his job as an electrical mechanic, Oscar began giving speeches to raise awareness about preventing crimes against women. His personal experience fueled his desire to ensure no other family would have to go through the same ordeal. But Oscar didn't stop at personal experience. He also took the time to educate himself on the law. In the second week of January 2017, the court finally allowed the children to stay with their maternal grandparents for the weekend. The Galliano family repainted the front of their house, the living room, and one of the bedrooms, and gave the place a thorough cleaning. On Friday, Oscar stayed at his parents' home in the town of Caseros, Buenos Aires, until the last minute, making sure the computer was set up and everything was ready for the kids to use. He didn't want to miss any details. They hung blue balloons at the door and made a colorful sign to welcome Nehuen and Geronimo. Graciela waited for her grandchildren with a homemade dish of Milanesa Napolitana. That weekend, the Galliano house was filled with joy. Nehuen and Geronimo played soccer, ping pong, and video games with their cousins. They even insisted on sleeping in the same bed with their grandmother, whom they hadn't seen in over 2 years. On November 24, 2018, Jose passed away at Sanguinetti Hospital in Pilar after suffering another stroke. This news was another shock for the children. They attended their father's funeral and later went to the cemetery. At one point, they pulled Monica aside, anxiously asking what would happen to them now. Monica, with as much calm and love as she could muster, reassured them that they would do whatever the children wanted, and promised to support them unconditionally. Both of them expressed a desire to live with Monica, and she asked them to inform their grandmother. Despite everything that had happened, and in order to protect the children, Rosanna's sister had to confront Elsa to explain Nahuen and Geronimo's decision. On this occasion, as on many others, it was clear that Monica always acted according to the children's wishes, whether it was listening to them when they wanted to talk or respecting their silence. Her main goal was to provide them with comfort and peace. By March 2019, Geronimo expressed that he didn't want to switch schools, as all his friends were in Pilar, and he only had 2 more years until graduation. So, he returned to live with his grandmother Elsa. Meanwhile, Monica filed for custody of Nahuen at Court No. 5 in San Isidro. However, in the last week of November 2019, Elsa, who was then 87, was transferred from her home in Villa Astolfi to Sanguinetti Hospital in Pilar. She passed away 3 days later on November 30th. The following month, Monica was granted custody of the younger child. Before the year ended, Geronimo moved in with a friend of his grandmother. At that time, both brothers still needed psychological support to process everything they had been through. Geronimo in particular struggled with some depressive issues. His psychologist told him, "There have been too many losses in a row. Just as you begin to recover from one, another happens." Worse yet, in March 2020, right before the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions began, the person Geronimo was living with kicked him out. So, the young man sought refuge at his Aunt Monica's house, where he stayed until October 2020. In November, he returned to Pilar to live with Ignacio, a person his grandmother Elsa had appointed as a caretaker. This arrangement lasted until March 2021, when Geronimo turned 18. At that point, he rented a small apartment and moved out on his own, living off the rental income from the properties his parents had left him. Meanwhile, Monica had already started the legal process regarding inheritance to ensure that nothing was taken from her nephews. It was a concern for her that someone might try to take away their assets. As for Nahuen, his psychologist noted that he seemed emotionally stable, thanks to the support he had received. In fact, he was enjoying a good social life. Geronimo's case was more complex. In some ways, he struggled to come to terms with his reality. However, one thing he never lacked and would never be without was the unwavering support from his maternal family. And with that, dear viewers, we come to the end of today's crime story. What are your thoughts on the tragedy that befell this young woman and her family? Please leave your comments below. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.